So the West is starting to push back against aggression, and China is rising. We'll talk about all that in these six big stories. It is Thursday, January 2nd, 2025. So we're going to start here. This is the ISW yesterday. The US-backed Syrian Democratic Forces and Turkish-backed Syrian National Army have continued to clash. So that's not good, and that's in northern Syria. HTS, that's the actual group that led the most of the revolt against Assad. HTS-led military operations department continued to clash with pro-Assad elements that refused to settle with the interim government and disarm. So that's what's been happening in Turkey. Hopefully they can figure out how to have the rebel groups kind of work together to push out whatever's remaining of Assad and then work together for the good of the country. Meanwhile, an unspecified Israeli official speaking to Israeli media expressed interest in increasing cooperation with US-led international coalition against the Houthis in Yemen. If you don't know who the Houthis are, they're another whole different problem. So if you're trying to get shipping through from Europe and the Mediterranean down through the northern part, through the Suez Canal and such, through the northern part of Africa and out into the Indian Ocean, you have to pass Yemen, and the Houthis occupy this area and they're targeting and harassing ships along the way. And that's become quite an irritant. The comments come amid continued U.S. airstrikes targeting the Houthis. That's not a good thing. It seizes up world trade, because if you have to go all the way around Africa, that becomes a whole different problem set. Okay, now Assad in Syria. He's fled Syria, he goes to Russia. There is a news article today, has Assad been poisoned in Russia? And here's what we know. And so what we know is not a whole lot yet. Russian Telegram channels are reporting that Bashar al-Assad may have been poisoned. Now, again, when I look at this, I don't see it in AP and Reuters and BBC. I see it in these like minor tabloid kind of papers and social media. So just take it with a grain of salt. The claim was made by General SVR, which it says is run by former and current members of the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, although it does not offer any evidence of these ties. British tabloid papers as well as social media users have picked up on the claims, which have not been independently verified. So it's important to understand that that has not yet been independently verified, and we're going to have to do that. Okay. Kolan is in Syria. Kolan's the guy that did the human safari video about what's happening, the drone attacks on civilians in Herzon. So we're going to listen to that for just a minute as he talks.
Behind me right now is proof that tyrants can actually be defeated. And as someone that's lived in Ukraine for the last 6 months and seen the chaos and destruction that Putin and people like Putin and Russia has wreaked on society, this is the New Year's Eve that Ukraine needs to have next year. Liberation from dictatorship. I've been asking people all day as well what they think about Ukraine. And someone actually gave me a Ukraine cap and said that we stand with Ukraine because we understand evil and Russia is our common enemy.
That's pretty amazing that they understand that in Syria. While in the West, a fraction of society is like, well, we just need them to make peace. No, that's not what they need to do. They need to defeat evil. Okay, now, Turkey's stock has risen because of Syria, and now Turkey could also become the natural gas exporter to the EU. Turkey is seen as the only safe alternative due to its strategic location and infrastructure. And now that Ukraine has cut off gas from Russia, this raises Turkey's profile even more. Jay in Kyiv wrote, Russians can try to downplay the blow that Ukraine inflicted yesterday by ending Russia's gas transit, but it will reduce Gazprom's already collapsed revenue by another 10%. That's right. So gas revenue has been like this and then kind of dropped like a rock yesterday. Just thought it was a great chart. Now, meanwhile, the Russians are playing some funny games with Moldova. The work of hundreds of businesses is put on hold. Thousands of people remain unemployed. Meanwhile, it's cold in 150 kindergartens, 130 schools, and other places within Moldova. But hopefully they can get that energy issue sorted out from other EU countries shortly. Okay, next big story. So The West is starting to push back, and Finland is in the lead of that. Now, Finland sees that tanker, and it's getting tough on hybrid warfare. This is an article in The Economist magazine, but Anton Gurashenko did a really good job summarizing it, so we're going to just look at what he said. Finland's resolute, swift handling of Estlink 2 sabotage is a, quote, turning point, unquote, for NATO's response to hybrid warfare, according to The Economist. 70% of Russian oil exports pass through the Baltic Sea through its shadow fleet. NATO has taken a hands-off approach to the Russian presence in its waters so far. And remember, NATO countries surround Russia in the Baltic Sea. By seizing the ship, the Finnish authorities were able to conduct a proper investigation and collect evidence that the severance of the Estlink 2 was an act of sabotage. Finnish prosecutors are preparing charges against the operators and owners of the Eagle S. This could act as a deterrent for foreign companies that allow Russia to use their vessels for nefarious purposes. The freedom of navigation provided by the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea only concerns innocent passage of ships. If a vessel threatens peace, good order, and security, it forfeits that right. Sabotage and spying hardly seem innocent. Now, the Latvian Prime Minister has told the BBC on December 29th that, quote, we should stop them, that means the shadow fleet, from going through the Baltic Sea. Our government has the power to seize those ships which do not obey international law and impose threats on our critical infrastructure. But nobody's had the guts to do it until Finland just did it after this last cable link was damaged. Okay. Let's turn our attention to China. What Putin has done in Ukraine has been very similar to what a toddler does testing the boundaries of their parents. And they're starting to push back and say, no, you're going to be in timeout. But China is starting to do the same kind of thing. Look at the example after example after example of what China is doing. China imposes sanctions against 28 U.S. companies. Now, I don't think the Trump administration is going to like that very much. The Chinese Ministry of Commerce added 28 U.S. companies to its export control list on Thursday, banning the sale of dual-use goods to them. The ministry stated that the restrictions, effective from January 2nd, were designed to safeguard national security and interests. The companies affected by this decision include major defense contractors such as General Dynamics, Boeing Defense, Space and Security, Lockheed Martin, and Raytheon Missiles and Defense. These are like the major defense contractors in the U.S. And now Russian dictator Putin has ordered his government and the country's largest bank, SberBank, to strengthen their collaboration with China on AI development. Hey, what could go wrong there, right? Now, this was in Radio Free Europe yesterday, and I was going to talk about it, and I didn't have enough time to do it while keeping things short. A tougher relationship with the United States could have wider ripple effects for Beijing. Unlike back in 2018, when Trump first unleashed tariffs on China, the country's economy is in a 2-year slump as it grapples with high debt, deflation, and a real estate crisis. Further economic pain brought by Washington could potentially push many of Beijing's global ambitions off course, leading to setbacks in tech, lending, and broader influence. But Xi isn't only facing headwinds as he prepares for Trump 2.0. Xi is banking that Trump's policies will alienate other countries from the United States, leading typically U.S.-friendly nations to hedge more toward China and a greater acceptance from others of Beijing's vision of world order. Now, I keep telling you that the world is connected and a lot of these things are related to each other. A perceived Russian victory in Ukraine would resonate particularly in China. One clear possibility is that it would embolden Xi to pursue his own ambitions in Asia. China under Xi has become more nationalistic and more menacing in its behavior toward Taiwan. Some prominent U.S. officials have speculated that Xi has told the military to be ready to conquer the island by 2027. That is the posture of the United States military right now, that we could very well be at war with China by 2027. Now, Xi himself has mentioned 2050, but already at 71 years old, that leaves a short window for Xi. Many Taiwanese officials have taken some solace in the China hawks that the incoming president appears to be surrounding himself with, like Rubio and others. Current and former Taiwanese officials said that both Taipei and Beijing are already drawing important lessons from the war in Ukraine, but the bigger one could come in 2025, as both countries watch how Kyiv's own experience with Western support plays out over time. So Western support for Ukraine right now could actually prevent a war with China. Now, China has been menacing Taiwan on the sea as well. Taiwan's Coast Guard has said that they have seen a record high 52 Chinese Coast Guard vessels breach the restricted waters this year. And yet China and Russia aren't seeming to work together. China is going to build the China-Kyrgyzstan-Uzbekistan railway, bypassing Russia and totally sidelining Moscow. It's not even a subtle way to show the world that it's China, not Russia, which is calling the shots in the region. Even the tightly controlled Chinese media isn't shy and being absolutely gleeful about this development. Well, they're cutting out the middleman of Russia. So they're not as tight as they would lead us to believe. All right, let's look at what happened in the United States in the last day or two. All right, let's look at what's happened in the United States in the last couple of days. On New Year's Eve in New Orleans, a man driving a rented pickup truck plowed into a crowd of people. This seems to be an intentional T incident. He's a 42-year-old man from Texas. His name was Shamuddin Jabbar, and what he did was pretty awful. Saw the same kind of thing happen in Europe. I think you're going to see more incidents around the world because it's just an easy thing to be able to do, to turn something into a weapon. It's as far as I can tell, it's in no way associated with Russia, although there was some kind of ISIS flag in his vehicle. Now, there was another incident where a Tesla Cybertruck blew up in front of a Trump building in Las Vegas. Elon Musk posted this: the evil knuckleheads picked the wrong vehicle for a T attack. Cybertruck actually contained the explosion and directed the blast upwards. Not even the glass doors of the lobby were broken. And when watching the video, that does seem to be the case, that's what happened. But this doesn't seem to be connected to anything else. This is just other evil people doing other evil things. Okay, on New Year's Eve, I posted this Ukraine war year in review. Didn't get a lot of views, but that could just be timing because, well, on New Year's Eve, people have other things to do other than watch me. So Anton Gurashenko posted this, and I thought, let me cover this because you do need to understand the big picture of what's actually happened to Russia over the course of the year. And if you want to go back and see this, I'm not covering necessarily the same things here either, so this would be still good to watch. But here are honest results of 2024 for Russia, what Putin will never admit during his press conferences and addresses. The war has come to Russia. Ukrainian ground operation in Kursk region became the first invasion of Russian territory since 1941. There were also regular drone attacks, shelling of border territories, fire at oil refineries, and military airfields, and authorization to strike deep into Russia with long-range weapons. Failures on the international level included the collapse of the Assad regime, the failure of pro-Russian candidates in presidential elections in Moldova, uncovering Russian influence in Romanian elections. Who knew that was going on? Protests in Georgia, the loss of the Austrian market for Russian gas supplies, increasing dependence on China. Now, there's also a labor shortage that's felt in all sectors of the Russian economy, and that's because they're pulling people into the military, and they have to pay them more, and inflation is rising as a consequence. There's a crackdown on individual freedoms, mandatory registration of bloggers, blocking of YouTube, sentences for fakes about the Russian army. It's all becoming more authoritarian. The ruble exchange rate is up. The fall of Gazprom, further decline of oil and gas revenues, bankruptcy of construction and transport companies, the steep drop of civil aviation, and you're going to see plane accidents this year, in my estimation. I could be wrong, but the way things are going, they're just not maintaining them, and I think that's going to happen this year as well. The rise of the price of essential goods and the shortage of eggs and butter. People are going to jail for stealing butter. Huge frontline losses. The UK Ministry of Defense estimate Russian losses killed and wounded for 2024 from 846 average daily casualties in January to 1,523 average daily casualties in November. But for the Kremlin, human losses are a replenishable resource. Women will make more babies, unprecedented bonuses as a signing contract, sending convicts to the front line, debtors and mortgage holders to the front line because they can get those debts removed, and deployment of soldiers from North Korea. This year, you had soldiers from North Korea coming to backfill for Russia. In February alone, 9 planes and 1 helicopter of the occupiers, quote, negatively took off. Negatively took off means what? Okay. Burning oil depots, and there's too many to even list here. It was all bad for Russia. There was a lot of really bad things that have happened, but you won't see that in some kind of speech. Okay, let me leave you with this. I've been on Spotify now for about a month, And I've seen, according to the analytics, about 1,000 hours of listening time. If you're the kind of person that would prefer to listen rather than watch, you can look me up on Spotify, Professor Gerdes Explains. That's all that I have for today. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes and the shares and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.